There is a very common saying where we believe that passion is the enemy of reason. And this thing is given to people where right before they're trying to make a decision. Or imagine somebody is about to perform on stage and we say that passion is the enemy of reason. It's understandable. If your passion is crazy, then of course your reason is going to be crippled. But this works both ways. Think about overthinkers, right? Thinking can be enemy of reason as well. Because thinking and reason are not the same thing. Because here by reason we mean the right thing to be done. So we don't really mean reason when we say passion is the enemy of reason. So we believe when we are saying passion is the enemy of reason, we believe that passion is the enemy of higher value things. That is a horrible idea to live by. And so it leads me to think about instinct versus intellect. This is a very common debate where people say that number one, you have instincts, and number two, you have the intellect. And instincts try to take control of your intellect, and then we should use intellect to take control of our instincts and put our instincts into correct order. Like I might have read him very quickly, but Vivekananda also said that we should control the animal inside of us. So that really means that, and I don't know what we can use to control that animal inside of us. He could have some other ideas. I could be ignorant about this. But the idea is that you got to control your impulses. That's what the idea is. And in other words, we are saying you got to control your instincts because passion is the enemy of reason. And only if they believe this, that passion is the enemy of reason. But I disagree with that. I disagree with that because I don't believe that there is any demarcation between instinct and intellect. Intellect is a type of instinct. You imagine that the way our evolution happened, at first we had the limbic system, right? We were all impulsive, running on emotions, for example, or running instinctively. We also look at crocodiles and we also call our limbic system to be the reptilian brain, right? Which is weird to say because they also have they also have a cortex. So I don't know what we mean by that. And also most common sayings are bullshit anyway. So we should look right through them. That's why I have my glasses to look right through them. But to look at thinking, for example, right? If we say intellect is thinking, to deal with thoughts, and for that thing to be to have any kind of what's it called, autonomy, to have any kind of autonomy over our instincts, that's got to be a crazy thing to believe. Because what was there before there was intellect? What was there before there was the ability to think? Emotions. And also if you give somebody a questionnaire and you ask them to rate their own life, it would depend heavily on their passion. It would depend heavily on their at present emotional state. And according to their emotional state, their thinking is going to run, and they're going to think about all the things that are in accordance to their affect. So it seems like feelings and thoughts, they work together. For example, in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a type of therapy, we believe that we can use people's thoughts to Bhaiya, ek chai liya na? Okay. We believe that we can use people's thoughts, and then that can be used to help them with their feelings. So those two things work together. They are not separate from each other either. I think they're in the same domain pretty much. Could be like levels of existence, the way it normally is. So passion is definitely not the enemy of reason. And sometimes passion can lead you to great things. For example, I think intuition also comes under passion, doesn't it? Intuition seems to be an instinct. For example, gut instinct, right? We have gut instinct because it said that what is the right thing to be done when we used to operate on survival mechanism, right? Through survival mechanism, we developed disgust, and disgust is stomach focused. That's why it's called gut feeling, because intuition is derived from our old instinct of disgust. That's why stomach, right? Your stomach starts to rumble when something crazy happens. You feel disgusted at, like, if something you did that was bad according to you. That's why when you feel guilty, when people feel guilty, they cannot eat food properly, or when they feel sad, they can't eat food properly. The reason is that their gut tells them that they did a bad thing. Conscience, for example, right? Now, conscience seems to be a higher order thing. Where did it come from? Came from an instinct of disgust. And so I think that the line we have drawn between instincts and intellect is bullshit, and we should get rid of that firsthand. Because try to predict your next thought. It's just not possible. Try to predict your next feeling. It's just not possible. We can only, contemplate so much so. But then if you also go with your thoughts and you go with your thoughts too much, like what runs your thoughts from one side to the other? Like, wouldn't it be stupid to believe that your intellect has its own autonomy? I mean, if you have not had food, for example, right? This was a research done on judges. If you have not had food, you make bad decisions. If your prefrontal cortex does not have sufficient glucose levels, it's not going to work properly and you're going to make bad decisions. So, of course, your thinking is based on your biology. And what is your biology if not the center of instincts? And so we have done that. We have did a terrible job as thinkers, I believe. Sting, an infamous drink, shouldn't drink this at all. So I believe that we have not done justice to even our own thinking, and also we propound this idea so much so that it is believed as a fact. And this also creates this kind of arrogance in thinkers, right? People who can think properly. Like, I'm also a thinker, I'm not a feeler. But we have associated thinkers to be of a higher value than feelers are. Like, feelers are weak, right? Because they are run by their feelings. But then they make some good decisions. They do. And they want affiliations, so they have affiliations. And thinkers don't want affiliations. They are pragmatic, so they want to do things for themselves. So they do things for themselves. There is no value structure there. There is no value hierarchy that we can put one above the other. We just can't. Feelers are not better than thinkers, and thinkers are not better than feelers. And pretty much, if you really think about it, thinking and feeling would turn out to be the same thing. Because what is running your thoughts from a thought A to the thought B, assuming that B follows thought A? It's an affect. Imagine that you're excited, right? Imagine you're excited or you're caffeinated and you're talking. It is influencing your thinking, and feeling kind of bridges your thoughts together. So, how can we say that thinking and feeling are different things? They are not. They exist on the same dimension. They're pretty much the same thing. But it's feeling, right? It's not really instincts, but what are feelings connected to? They are connected to instincts, are they not? One thing I would like to say is that before our mind becomes aware of a thing, our body does beforehand. This was said by Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers believed that our body knows what it is. Nietzsche, on the other hand, said that your body has the deepest philosophies than your mind can have. I think there is a lot of truth to that. I use this metaphor a lot, right? Like, you go on stage and you feel nervous. Why do you feel nervous? Your mind knows that it's just people who half of the time, or maybe most of the time, depends on how good you are at speech, don't give a fuck about what you're saying there. And they are more interested in their own thoughts than they are interested in your thoughts, right? So it will be not a hassle to talk to them. But why does the body shake? The body shakes because of your instincts, right? Because you look at those people and your mind knows that they are human beings, but your body doesn't. Your body feels that you are vulnerable right in front of so many people, so many eyes on you, they are judging you, and all that shit. Why does that happen? And the type of thinking you have then, is that not instinctual? And if it is instinctual then, and there is another condition, right, where you're calmed down and you have some kind of thoughts, like suddenly your thoughts have autonomy, it's just not possible. You cannot have autonomy if you, and I do believe you make better decisions if you're chilling out, but that doesn't mean that it gives thoughts some kind of upper position in the value hierarchy. It just simply doesn't. When it comes to feelings, for example, like how many times entrepreneurs, for example, we hear a lot of stories, they make great decisions based on their feelings or their intuition or their instincts, because tons of life is uncertain, and it's more uncertain than it is certain. So you cannot go with your thoughts. You have to go with your feelings and intuition. You got to trust your body a little bit and just go with it and go with its wisdom. That's what should be preached, and that's what should be contemplated in public. And we cannot do that till we segregate thinking and feeling. We just can't do it. If we are segregating both of them, it's going to be a big problem for us, especially in mental health dimensions. We cannot really believe, even instinctually, that that thoughts and feelings and instincts are separate from each other. They are just not separate from each other. They are the same thing. They exist in the same dimension, and they serve the same purpose. I mean, if they are serving the same purpose, then it's beautiful. But if they are serving different purposes, for example, in your head, if your thoughts, if you know that you have to do certain things, another sip of stink. You should never drink this. If your thoughts come up with an idea, thank you, Bia. If your thoughts come up with an idea, if your if your thoughts come up with an idea that you should be doing certain behavioral patterns, but then your feelings come and they cause a break, right? So your thoughts are accelerating towards something, but then your feelings are pushing the brakes. Then you have to bring them to the same purpose. That's what you have to do. You have to integrate both of them together. You cannot be thinking that your feelings are bullshit and just go with the thoughts. You gotta use your feelings to the better, right? Because that is what people do. Even people who say you gotta just do things regardless of what you feel. What happens? You do something, you get some evidence, and then you do get the feeling that you gotta do this shit. So you are integrating it anyway, and we are doing that thing anyway. But we believe that there is a difference between, not a difference between, but then that passion is the enemy of reason. Passion is not the enemy of reason. Passion can be turned into having the same purpose that thought has. So, and that's how it supports reason. What do we mean by reason here? By reason, we mean something which is of higher value that should be pursued. For example, an ideal, right? Like if you have a good ideal, and if you have a good ideal, and I define good ideal as something that inspires behavioral patterns that integrate your thoughts and feelings together. So that's what an ideal is. A good ideal is. They can be bad ideals as well. But ideal is anything you move towards. And if you have a bad ideal, it's going to be horrible. If you have a good ideal, it's going to be great. And so that is what we have to do. And we cannot integrate both of them if we start banishing one. Because what we are doing is we are living in truth, because whenever we force ourselves and give ourselves evidence that we can do good shit, it ends up in us having an affect, a passion that supports the reason. And by reason, again, something which is of higher value and something that is worth pursuing, for example, an ideal. And so there seems to be no difference between that. The whole debate, and this is a very famous debate, instinct versus intellect, it just seems to be bullshit. It's just kind of like, hey, it's like red versus red. There's not a fight there. The fight is just made up. So you imagine like two teams fighting each other, and when two teams are against each other, what does that mean, right? One team is different from the other. You cannot have one team fighting one team. It's just not possible. It's impossible. So there is no sense in saying that, not even saying like to start the debate on instinct versus intellect. There just isn't. There isn't any. Your emotions are run by your biology. Your thoughts are run by your biology. Your decision making completely depends on your glucose levels. So how is that? How is that different? Those things are together. And why do we do this? Like, why do we make demarcations always? We make demarcations so we can think properly. Because if you take things as whole, you cannot think about them. So you segregate them, and then you try to study the parts. And then after you have studied the parts, you bring all the parts together. And we assume that if we have figured out the parts, the little parts, and we integrate them later, we will have a better understanding of the whole. But then there comes the G-stalled part, that whole is different, or whole is other than the sum of its parts. There is this very common metaphor, not metaphor, I think, it's allergy, not allergy. There's this common saying that if you want to understand water, you need to study water. You cannot study hydrogen and oxygen and then bring your studies together and try to predict what water is. Water is a completely different thing. So this is how the whole is other than the sum of its parts. But still, we try to make those differences. We try to put those demarcations because they are functional. It's just so there we can function and we can study. But it leads to more ignorance than it leads to uh, enlightenment, whatever enlightenment means, or illusion, or not illusion, illumination. It just doesn't. And it's just kind of like we're chasing our tail, and even if we get our tail, we're going to bite our asses. So that's not going to be a good idea anyway. And so in conclusion, the idea is this: thoughts, feelings, and instincts are not different from each other. They exist on the same plane. And maybe instincts are more deeper than thoughts are. I mean, that's what I believe. Or feelings are. Because thoughts and feelings, they originate from instincts, right? Both of them are instinctual reactions, because thoughts or feelings do not have any autonomy over instincts. And so that's going to be it.